Welcome everyone to my channel. Today's story happened in Australia in 2005. What happened some time ago on Father's Day, always celebrated in that country on the first Sunday of September, is still remembered by everyone there to this day. On September 4th, 2005, the father of a family was driving a car with his 3 children in the back seats. What followed gave rise to events that even now, years later, are described as the case that shook Australia. It is late Sunday afternoon on September 4th, 2005. Cindy Gambino, 33, is at her home in Winchelsea, state of Victoria, trying to get some rest. It's a good opportunity, as her children are currently spending time with their father, Robert. Cindy and Robert are divorced and have not lived together for nearly a year, but the woman is trying to make the separation of her 3 sons from their father as painless as possible for them. Recently, for example, she drove the boys to Robert's, even though his planned visitation with them did not fall this weekend. But today is Father's Day, and Cindy, having learned that her ex-husband would return from work at 3 p.m., offered to bring the children to him herself. Cindy smiles warmly as she recalls the impact with which 10-year-old Jai and 7-year-old Tyler rushed into their father's apartment, and how they jumped up impatiently as they stood by him, anxious to unwrap the gifts meant for him. 2-year-old Bailey, whom she was holding in her arms at the time, watched the scene with great curiosity. Robert was grateful and kissed the children one by one. Cindy noted that he was particularly touched by the gift of a framed photo of his 3 sons. It was actually her idea, and she also took the photo to be framed herself. Jai and Tyler really wanted to spend the rest of the day with their dad today. But Bailey, the youngest, that was Cindy's impression, didn't feel like parting with her. His brothers persuaded him, however, including the fact that the plan was to go out to dinner with their dad at their favorite restaurant. Having seen the enthusiasm in little Bailey's eyes, Cindy, without guilt, left him with his father as well and drove home herself. Cindy glances at the clock. The children should be back soon. She asks Robert to bring them no later than 7:30 p.m. Cindy makes the children's beds, lays out their pajamas, and prepares their clothes for the next day. Once again, the thought occurs to her that she made the right decision in separating from her husband. Perhaps it works out for the boys too, because now their relationship with their father is incomparably better than before. Robert had a strange manner of teasing his sons, sometimes giving her the impression of bullying them. Cindy met Robert when they were both still teenagers. They belonged to the same group. She liked him. Later, they even became friends. However, she did not find him attractive and thus never considered that something more could come out of it. She had, after all, a boyfriend whom she loved very much. Everything changed when her beloved was killed in a car accident. Cindy took it hard and could not recover for a long time. Robert supported her and helped her a lot. Cindy doesn't even know how it happened that sometime later, their friendship turned into a relationship. After 6 months of being with Robert, she became pregnant, and when Jai was born, the 3 of them moved in together. They didn't get married until 2000, when their second son, Tyler, was already born. They settled in a rented house in Winchelsea, a small town 110 kilometers from Melbourne. Things have not really worked out in their relationship since their first child was born. At least that's what Cindy thinks now. Robert felt overburdened by his duties as the father of the family, had no desire to take care of the children, and when a business he had high hopes for didn't work out, he blamed everyone but himself. He felt constantly frustrated and took his anger out on those around him, including his own children. At the same time, both Cindy and acquaintances and friends got the impression that Robert was content to hold a grudge against the whole world, while he himself was doing nothing to change the state of affairs. In November 2004, Cindy had had enough and put her husband's suitcases out the door. The children stayed with her while her husband moved out to live with his father. She quickly found that her life, despite the onslaught of responsibilities, was now much better than before. She received unexpected support from an acquaintance, Stephen Moles, with whom she became very close. Stephen is a divorcee with 3 children. When he and Cindy met, they found that they both agreed that, for the time being, They do not want either a permanent relationship or to live together. However, since they feel comfortable in each other's company, they want to live today and put off any other decisions for the future. Cindy guesses that Robert is jealous, but fortunately, this is no longer her problem now. Cindy suddenly realizes that her scheduled time has long since passed. She is overwhelmed with anxiety. After the divorce, Robert kept a close eye on every minute arrangement. Maybe something had happened, or maybe his car broke down. She decides to wait a little longer, and only then call his cell phone. When she hears a car pull up in front of the house, the woman breathes a sigh of relief. "Phew, they're here," she says to herself in her mind. But the sounds coming from the yard seem different to her than usual, and after a while, she hears someone pounding on the door with their fists. Cindy runs to the entrance. On the threshold stands Robert, crying and dripping with water. "The children are in the water," he says. "I must have had a coughing attack and passed out. I woke up in the water. I couldn't get them out." The woman doesn't understand what's going on. She only knows that something terrible has happened. She starts screaming, "Where are the children?" "In the lake," replies Robert. "Why didn't you stay with them?" shouts Cindy. The only thing running through her head is the thought that this must be about an artificial lake lying near a nearby overpass, and that an emergency number must be called. Cindy will later remember only that she jerked Robert around, screaming and looking for the keys to her car, and then that she was driving at 145 kilometers per hour and calling somewhere at the same time. Stephen Moles is sitting in his home when his landline phone rings. As the man picks up the phone, he hears Cindy shouting into it, "The children are in the water. The children are in the water." Stephen doesn't understand a thing. "What children?" he asks. "Robert had some kind of accident." "I don't know anything." "Near the overpass," shouts Cindy. The conversation breaks off. Stephen only knows that something has happened and that he must immediately go to this place. When the man reaches the artificial lake, it is exactly 7:49 p.m. Stephen runs down the embankment. Now, being on the spot, he begins to guess what could have happened. Robert's car, for some reason, went sideways, cut across the opposite lane, broke through the fence and drove into the body of water created here after the gravel pit was sunk. But why should the children be in the water when Robert emerged from the incident unharmed? Stephen sees that the man is standing by the shore without moving. Cindy chaotically runs around and can be heard talking to the emergency line operator. In addition, neither the children nor the car are anywhere to be seen. Stephen jumps into the water without a moment's hesitation. Immediately afterwards, an ambulance and traffic police officers arrive at the scene. Divers are also expected to arrive soon. The services have little information about the accident. All they know is that Robert Farquharson drove off the Prince's Highway at a point between the towns of Winchelsea and Geelong, and then drove into the lake with 3 children still trapped in the car. Now, the person responsible for the accident explains to police that he was driving the car, got a sudden coughing attack, and passed out. He woke up in the water. The car was rapidly submerging. The children were trapped, and he got out. He tried to dive to pull them out, but was unsuccessful. Robert explains that when he passed out, the car had to go off the road directly into the lake. To the paramedic, this story seems very strange, since, as he knows from his own experience, such strong coughing attacks are extremely rare, and if they do, they don't pass after a few seconds or so. Officers from the traffic police also point out that something is amiss here. This is because there are no signs on the road to indicate that the driver, having suffered an attack, tried to control the car. For now, however, the explanations given by Robert must be enough, as the man must be taken to the hospital. The ambulance also takes the still screaming Cindy. A frozen Stephen, who was told by a paramedic to get out of the water immediately, is sent home. It was not until 1:40 a.m. that divers succeeded in tracking the car underwater. It is pulled ashore. The driver's door is open. Inside are the corpses of 3 children. Jai's body lies in position between the front seats, from which it can be inferred that he almost managed to get out of the car. Both he and Tyler have their seatbelts unfastened. It's a harrowing image even for police officers, who, after all, have seen more than one thing in their lives. The next day, Cindy, further traumatized, is still lying in the hospital. The children's corpses are identified by Stephen. The family is busy making funeral preparations. Robert is still crying, while claiming that he will never forgive himself for accidentally causing the death of the children. All family members, including Cindy, are convinced that it was an unfortunate accident, especially as they see the father's genuine despair. Information about the tragic accident hits the media. Expressions of sympathy are pouring in from all over the country. When the funeral takes place sometime later, photos and accounts of the funeral are shown on all TV channels, portals, and front pages of newspapers. Everyone can see a tearful Robert supporting a fainting Cindy as the funeral ceremony continues. No one can imagine that this distraught father could intentionally cause the death of his children. All the while, however, the police are conducting a very intensive investigation. The case seems highly suspicious to the officers, as they come across further inconsistencies in addition to the strange coughing story and the previously stated lack of brake marks. The position of the keys in the ignition, for example, indicates that the headlights have been turned off, as well as the car itself. For what reason would a driver sitting in a car driving into water think to turn off the ignition as well as the lights? His behavior after the accident also seems completely incomprehensible. Why did he not immediately call for help, but instead drove to the children's mother to inform her of the tragedy? Or can this behavior be explained by the shock he suffered? Robert Farquharson himself, who, by the way, is questioned repeatedly in the following weeks, insists that he experienced shock and cannot explain his behavior immediately after the accident. He also insists that he finds the police's suspicions absurd, also because there is no reason why he would choose to commit such a cruel act. But police are gathering evidence that says otherwise. Based on the traces collected at the scene and the examination of the fished-out car, officers are able to determine what maneuvers the driver made immediately before the accident. Namely, the first turn of the steering wheel was made to drive off the street. At the same time, there are no traces on the road to indicate that the driver lost control of the vehicle. After the second turn of the steering wheel, the wheels arranged themselves so that the car drove straight, while after the third turn, the car missed a tree. Investigators also reached the testimony of a witness who said that roughly 3 months before the tragedy, Robert had threatened to pay his wife back for everything. When the witness asked what he actually meant, Robert reportedly replied, "I will take away from her what is most important to her in life," and made it clear that he meant the children. The witness thought it was just that kind of talk, and that Robert was angry because he had a lot of financial burdens after his separation from Cindy. Many people around him, moreover, testified that the man was very frustrated and complained to everyone around him that after the divorce got an inferior car. The investigation is difficult. There is more circumstantial evidence than evidence in the case, and the police hesitate for a long time to make a final decision. But this one finally falls through, and on December 14, 2005, Robert Farquharson is arrested on suspicion of murdering his 3 children. Cindy is shocked. Although she has been informed of the police's current findings, she does not believe in Robert's guilt and did not expect his arrest to ever happen. In an interview with the police, she stresses that her ex-husband loved the children and, in her opinion, would not have been capable of committing such a cruel act. And besides, it is hard to imagine what purpose he would have in doing so. The attitude of the children's mother has a decisive influence on the point of view of the media, which, of course, after Robert's arrest, immediately begin to write about the case. The attitude toward the police is very negative. The prevailing belief is that the investigators handling the case have decided to find a scapegoat. All of this contributes to making all the paperwork difficult and stretched out over time. As a result, the trial does not begin until August 2007. Although many witnesses, including Cindy, support the accused in their testimony, the evidence is very incriminating for him. Police are also submitting the results of an experiment designed to recreate the circumstances of the accident. An identical car was sunk in the same artificial lake and tested to see how long it would completely submerge. The experiment showed that it takes long enough that a driver who, like Robert, emerged from the accident unscathed would still have plenty of time to save the passengers, or at least one of them. Farquharson's trial is being reported in every detail in the media. Earlier negative attitudes toward the police are gaining even more intensity. On social media, in comments on texts on portals, and on websites set up specifically for this purpose, the police are constantly accused of scapegoat hunting. Internet attacks are also often personal in nature, making the wave of hegemony painfully felt not only by investigators, but also by their family members. On November 16th, after 6 weeks of trial and 3 days of deliberation by jury members, the verdict is reached. Robert receives 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Cindy, who is still convinced of his innocence, gets a shock upon hearing the verdict, and an ambulance straight from the courtroom takes her to the hospital. She cannot believe her ex-husband premeditatedly murdered her children. However, the convict appeals the verdict. On December 17, 2009, another trial begins. The defense succeeds in getting Robert Farquharson released on bail on December 21st, with the best prospects of being acquitted in the course of a further trial. Then, something happens that unexpectedly changes the course of events. A new witness, a woman named Dawn Waite, reports to the police. The woman reports that she was driving behind Robert on the day of the accident on September 4, 2005, and remembers the whole situation perfectly. Dawn Waite explains that she did not come forward as a witness during the first trial because she was diagnosed with cancer at the time. She did not follow the case closely in the media, but she associated that the perpetrator of the accident had been arrested and later convicted of triple murder. She was sure that the driver's guilt was obvious. The witness says it was only now, having seen the latest coverage of the case on television, that she realized there were no witnesses who saw what she saw, and her testimony may prove crucial. On that day, a car driving in front of her immediately caught her attention. The man driving it was driving slowly and braking frequently, quite as if he was looking for a spot by the side of the road. She decided to overtake him. During this maneuver, she noticed that there were 3 children in the back seat of the car. She did not see the driver coughing at that moment. A short time later, she noticed in her rearview mirror that the car was turning to the right, toward the artificial lake. She thought then that the driver had apparently already found what he was looking for. Dawn Waite's testimony changes everything and becomes the ultimate evidence for Cindy at the same time. It finally comes to the woman that this was not an accident, and that her ex-husband felt such hatred for her that he decided to destroy her life, and that he accomplished what he had planned. The woman also grasps that she herself had long refused to allow the thought of Robert's deliberate actions into her consciousness. She repressed it perhaps because she herself felt guilty in some way, if only for the fact that she had completely trusted her ex-husband in the matter of the children. Robert Farquharson's retrial begins on May 4, 2010. A few months later, on October 15th, the man is sentenced to life imprisonment. Cindy is married to Stephen and has 2 children with him. However, in each of her interviews, which, by the way, she gives regularly every few years, she emphasizes that after September 4, 2005, she feels that part of her life died with her children. Cindy says she has never been able to come to terms with the tragedy and somehow close that chapter, and her pain is magnified on days when there are anniversaries of the children's birthdays or anniversaries of some other event. Memories and thoughts of her sons accompany her from morning to night. On May 12, 2022, 17 years later, the Australian media reported Cindy's death, caused by sudden medical episode at age 50. Her family publishes a statement calling Cindy a warrior for justice and thanking everyone who supported her after the tragedy in 2005. Thanks for listening to this story. Goodbye and stay safe.